You tapped your phone and walked out of the store? It took about a second. Your phone was already in your hand. You held it near the terminal, felt the small vibration, and that was it. Whatever you bought was yours. At no point did you see money. At no point did you count anything out or watch a number of bills move from one hand to another. The transaction registered as a brief interaction with a device you were already holding, and then it was over. Now think about the last time you paid for something with cash. The specific feeling of opening your wallet, selecting the bills, handing them over, watching them taken. The moment where what you had became less. It is a different experience than tapping a phone. Not just logistically different, emotionally different. The cash version has a quality the card version does not, and that quality has a name, and it has been studied carefully enough to know what it costs you. The quality is called the pain of paying, and it is one of the most consequential and least visible forces operating on everyday spending behavior. Drazen, Prelec, and Duncan Simester, researchers at MIT, spent years investigating the relationship between payment method and spending behavior. Their central finding was that the form of payment, not the amount, not the product, not the buyer's income, independently affects how much people are willing to spend. People consistently spend more when paying by credit card than when paying with cash for identical purchases in identical circumstances. The medium of payment changes the behavior. In one of their most cited studies, Prelec and Simester ran an auction for sold-out sporting event tickets. Participants were told in advance that some of them would pay by cash and some by credit card. The credit card group bid significantly more for the same tickets than the cash group, not a small difference. In some conditions, the credit card bids were more than double the cash bids. The product was identical. The buyers were comparable. The payment method was the variable. The explanation Prelec and Simester developed centers on what they identified as the coupling between payment and consumption. Cash tightly couples the moment of payment to the moment of purchase. When you hand over bills, the transaction has an immediate and tangible cost. The money is gone visibly and physically and simultaneously with the acquisition of the item. The pain of that exit, what Prelec and Simester called the pain of paying, acts as a brake on spending. It introduces friction at the exact moment the decision is being made. Credit cards decouple payment from consumption. The item arrives immediately. The payment arrives later, buried in a statement, aggregated with dozens of other transactions, separated from the original purchase by days or weeks. The coupling is broken. The pain that would have acted as a brake at the moment of decision is absent, deferred, or diluted, and spending rises accordingly. Dan Ariely, who has spent years documenting the logic behind irrational financial decisions, extended this research into the concept of what he calls payment pain as a spending regulator. His work found that the brain monitors spending in real time when cash is involved in a way that it does not when a card is used. Cash spending activates the same neural regions associated with physical pain, while card spending does not produce the same activation. The card transaction literally does not hurt the same way. This is not a small or marginal effect. Ariely found that the presence or absence of payment pain changes not just how much people spend, but what they spend it on. Cash buyers are more likely to buy necessities. Card buyers are more likely to buy indulgences. The same person with the same amount of money makes categorically different purchasing decisions depending on whether they are spending physical bills or swiping a piece of plastic. Richard Thaler, whose mental accounting framework appeared in an earlier video in this series, observed a related mechanism. He noted that the psychological accounting of a purchase is partly dependent on how tightly the payment and the consumption are linked in time and experience. When payment and consumption happen simultaneously and tangibly, the mental account for that purchase is clear and immediate. When they are separated, as they are with credit cards and even more dramatically with deferred payment schemes, the accounting becomes ambiguous. The purchase gets mentally coded as something you already have, while the payment gets mentally coded as something that will happen later to a slightly different version of you. This is the mental accounting problem in a specific form. The future self who pays the credit card bill is not fully experienced as the same person as the present self making the purchase, and the present self, knowing that, allows more spending than would happen if the payment were immediate. The research on tipping illustrates this in a particularly clear way. Studies of tipping behavior consistently show that people tip more generously when paying by credit card than when paying with cash. The service is identical. The satisfaction is identical. The only difference is that when paying by card, the tip is a number written on a slip of paper rather than physical bills removed from a wallet. The pain of paying is lower and the generosity goes up. Which sounds positive until you recognize that this is not generosity in the direction the tipper necessarily intended. It is spending that exceeds the tipper's actual stated preferences because the payment medium removed the regulatory friction. Prelec and Simester also documented the buffet effect, which operates through the reverse mechanism. When people pay for a buffet in advance, before they eat, before they have any particular appetite, before the immediate consumption experience is present, they eat significantly more than people who pay the same amount at the end of the meal. Because they have already paid, the consumption is mentally coded as free. The coupling works in both directions. Decouple payment from consumption in time, and consumption increases regardless of which comes first. The evolution of payment technology has systematically moved in the direction of lower friction and less pain. Cash requires physical handling and visible transfer. Checks require writing and mailing. Credit cards require a signature, or at least an insertion and a PIN. Contactless cards require a tap. Phone payments require a gesture with a device already in hand. Each step in that progression removed one more element of the payment experience that the brain was using to register cost. Buy now, pay later schemes extend this further still. The purchase and the first payment are decoupled by weeks. The total cost is distributed across a series of smaller payments that each individually fall below the pain threshold. The brain registers a series of small costs rather than one large one, which consistently results in spending more than would have happened under a single payment. This is not an accident of product design, it is the product. Morgan Housel, writing in The Psychology of Money, makes a point that applies directly to this pattern. He argues that the most dangerous financial behavior is not the dramatic mistake, but the steady accumulation of small spending decisions that never individually trigger alarm. Each tap-to-pay transaction that avoids the pain of paying is not a problem on its own, but spending behavior that is consistently 5, 10, or 15% higher than it would be with cash, across years of transactions, across a working lifetime of purchases, is not a rounding error. It is a structural feature of how the financial gap between income and wealth fails to widen. The practical reflection here is not an argument for only spending cash. The friction of cash is real and sometimes genuinely costly. Card rewards, security, convenience, these have value. The point is something more foundational. The point is to notice that the payment medium is doing work that feels like it isn't doing anything. When you tap your phone in a second and walk out of a store, something happened in that second that did not happen when you counted out bills. The signal that normally regulates the decision, the pain, the visibility, the immediacy, was absent. And absent that signal, the decision was made with less resistance than it would otherwise have had. That is not a reason to avoid cards. It is a reason to know that when you use one, the brake is off. And knowing the brake is off is the first step toward deciding whether the spending that results is what you actually wanted. You tapped your phone and walked out of the store. The question is, what didn't happen in the second it took?